The depth gauge on my wrist said 84 meters, and I remember thinking very clearly that if anything went wrong down there, nobody was ever going to pull our bodies out. 84 meters in a flooded limestone throat under the jungle. Fresh water overhead, but it felt heavier than steel. The tunnel pinched so tight around my cylinders that every kick made my stages squeal against the walls, that high, ugly note of metal scraping rock. It sounded like the cave was chewing on us. We called this restriction the gut. Other cenotes here had names from maps and brochures. This one didn't exist on paper. No tourist hopes, no ladeiros, no Instagram. Just a hole in the jungle floor that Beckett had found on satellite imagery, a black pupil in the green. Beckett was ahead of me in the passage. All I could see of him were the neon yellow tips of his fins and the frantic halo of his light, carving white tunnels through the dark. We were too far in, too deep. I knew it. He knew it. You don't push an 80-plus meter cave dive with just 2 divers on open circuit unless you have a death wish or a deadline. Beckett had both. I tapped my light against my left tank. Clank, clank. Check pressure. He didn't even glance back. His fins beat faster, chopping the water, and I saw the faint puff of silt his kicks stirred from the floor. I wanted to kill him. We'd had this fight 3 times in the last 48 hours, topside on the jungle pool with mosquito bites on our ankles and sweat running down our backs. Me with the slate, doing the gas math. Him pacing on the rocks, ring tan on his finger pail against the rest of his hand, hair tied back in a wet knot. You're treating this like a fucking tourist dive, I told him. You want to sightsee? Fine, stay in the daylight zone. 80 meters in a virgin cave is not a place to improvise. And you're treating it like a spreadsheet. He'd snap back, kicking a stone into the water. The grant evaporates at the end of the month. The university pulls the truck, the compressors, the fucking oxygen. We go home with 2 shitty little side passages mapped and some blurry GoPro footage. Or we connect this system to the aquifer like I know we can, and they'll never shut us down again. Alive, I'd said. We go home alive or it doesn't count. He'd looked at the cenote instead of at me. The pool was perfectly still, a black mirror inside its ring of rock and vines. You never saw wind on that water. It didn't ripple. It just lay there like it was waiting. Listen, he said softer. You heard it last night too. I hadn't planned on admitting that, but yeah. Lying in my hammock strung between 2 mangroves, half asleep under a mosquito net, I'd heard something all right. Not jungle. Not howler monkeys or frogs. Not our compressors chugging down by the truck. Under everything else, from somewhere down in that flooded rock, there'd been a sound. Click. Pause. Click, click. The timing was off, too regular for dripping water, too slow for shrimp, too heavy for the snapping of tiny things. You feel the kind of sound through your chest more than your ears. Like something hard tapping on the inside of a hollow wall. It's probably rock shifting, I told him. Thermal contraction. Gas pockets. It was answering, he said. I tapped the ladder with my knife. It tapped back. Same pattern. That doesn't make it a fucking person. He'd smiled then, the way he always did when he thought I was being deliberately dense. Of course not. It's water. That's the point. There's more down there, Ash. More than the lines already mapped to the tourist caves. These cenotes are just skylights. The actual system is bigger, deeper. Think about it. A river nobody's ever seen, running under half the peninsula. We're not supposed to ignore it. That was Beckett. Philosophical to the point of suicidal. So now we were here, inside the gut. No line back to the truck yet, no rope ladder in sight, just our breadcrumb of nylon guidelines stretching behind us, and 80 meters of overhead rock. He kicked again, full force, and I watched in horror as his fin blades plowed a furrow through the pale, undisturbed clay of the cave floor. The golden rule of overhead diving is simple. Don't touch the fucking bottom. Virgin cave isn't sand. It's dust that's been falling for millennia. Fines, inorganic sludge, and microcrumbs of rock, all stacked in perfectly stable layers waiting for an idiot to kick them. You stir it up, visibility goes to zero. No up, no down, no exit. You're in a snow globe of mud. I reached forward and caught his ankle. He jerked, startled by the contact, and twisted around, eyes wide in his mask. My light hit his chest. His exhaled bubbles roared up against the roof in a boiling white sheet. I jabbed 2 fingers toward the floor, then dragged my thumb across my throat. Cut it out. He glared, then flashed an okay with exaggerated sarcasm and yanked his ankle free. He turned, jammed his fins upward to keep them clear of the bottom, and started forward again. Too late. The silt he'd kicked didn't drift back and settle like it sometimes does in bigger caverns. There was no room. The gut squeezed everything into a narrow volume. The silt boiled instead, caught in the slipstream of his body. A brown fog rolled backward from his fins and swallowed me whole. I dumped a puff of air from my wing, trying to stop my momentum before I ran blind into his legs. My harness creaked as the straps took my weight. The rock overhead kissed my first stage with a knock I felt through my teeth. Then the world just went away. 1 second, I had clear water and Beckett's fins. The next, my light was a useless white disc, reflecting off suspended particles inches in front of my face. Silt out. I stopped kicking. That's instinct hammered into you in every cave class. No wild thrashing. No desprit grabbing. You freeze. You breathe. You find the line. My heart didn't get the message. It slammed in my chest like a trapped bird. I forced my hands to move slow. Left hand on the right hand wall. Right hand, sweeping the space above my shoulder where the guideline should be. Water. Rock. Rock. Nothing. The thin nylon lifeline that had been there all the way in, snugged neatly in place with little wraparounds on every projection. Gone. My pulse ramped up into a high whine in my ears. I moved my hand farther. Touched smooth stone, rough stone, nothing that felt like string. Beckett must have popped it off a tie-off when he surged forward or dragged it across an edge sharp enough to cut. Either way, there was no tether between me and daylight anymore. I checked my SPG by habit, though the little part of my brain, still thinking straight, already knew the answer. 110 bar. At 84 meters on trimix, while you're trying to keep your shit together, that's about 20 minutes if you're a Zen monk. 5 if you're someone like me right then, shaking and swallowing against a rising tide of panic. Something touched my shoulder. I flinched hard enough to smack my head on the roof, then realized it was just the rock above brushing my tank as I drifted. I grabbed that rock and held on. Anchor yourself to something, my old cave instructor's voice said in the back of my brain. You don't win against a cave by thrashing. You win by outweighting it. So I waited. The silt felt like it was inside my mask, inside my throat. It smelled like nothing. Your sense of smell shuts off under a reg, but I tasted memory of mud. The cold soaked through my dry suit, more psychological than physical. 84 meters of water overhead and maybe another 30 of rock. A couple of 100 feet of weight bearing down on my skull. The cave creaked. Or maybe that was my imagination trying to hear anything over the roar of my own breathing. Hiss click, roar, bubble churn. Narcosis came in gentle. It always does, like a warm drink sliding down. At this depth, nitrogen or helium in the wrong proportions, or CO2 if you're starting to skip breathe, turns your brain fuzzy. 4 or 5 strong cocktails on an empty stomach. The textbooks call it impaired cognitive function. Divers call it getting narked. It doesn't show up the same every time. Mine started as a feeling that the water had changed. Not temperature, not current, texture. It felt thicker against my exposed cheeks where my mask skirt didn't quite seal right. My fingertips, pressed on the rock, registered something viscous, like honey, sliding slowly past. I knew that was bullshit. I knew the physics, but knowing doesn't make the sensation disappear. It just sets up an argument in your own skull. This is just narcosis, Ash. Yeah? Then why do you suddenly want to take your edge out? Because your body is an idiot. Because your lungs are screaming about the CO2 that doesn't vent as easily this deep. and part of you thinks if I just get a mouthful of fresh. I bit down harder on the mouthpiece. I thought of my instructor's voice again, flat and bored and endlessly patient. Narcosis is not your friend. Don't play with it. Don't test how far you can go. Just do your checks and get the fuck shallower. If I'd actually listened to that voice consistently in my life, I wouldn't have been in the gut with Beckett. Somewhere ahead of me, something moved. The silt wasn't a uniform wall anymore. It shimmered like fog behind a headlight. A faint glow grew in front of me, diffuse at first, just a suggestion of brightness. My brain, drunk as it was, still did the math. Light equals diver. Beckett had turned. He was coming back. I tapped my tank again with my light head, the standard simple signal we'd agreed on topside. Clank, clank. The glow swayed, left to right to left like a search beam in haze. Then it steadied, held. I felt a stupid rush of relief. That's the narc for you. 1 second you're sure you're going to die. The next second you're convinced this is all fine because you see a flash of light. I finned toward it with tiny frog kicks, tried to avoid stirring more silt, one hand still scraping the wall. The particles thinned a little as I moved, enough for the light to become a cone, then a beam, then Beckett. His silhouette grew in front of me, vertical in the water, body perfectly still except for a faint drift of his fins. His primary hung just below his right hand, beams slanted toward me. My brain cataloged what it saw before my emotions caught up. Left shoulder strap on his BCD hanging loose. That wasn't right. Side mount cylinder on his left side drooping, held by a single hose. That wasn't just not right, it was impossible. The hose would have torn out under that weight. No vabes. At 84 meters on open circuit, every breath is violent. Air blasts into you. It roars out in torrents of bubbles. You feel across your cheeks, see it hammer into the ceiling. No glints of expanding gas around his headlamps. No eruption against the rock above him. Just this still figure in the beam. Now the fear hit, like the cave had finally thrown the switch on the trap and decided to let me understand where I was. I flashed my light twice across his chest. Our agreed, "You good?" signal. No response. He just hovered. I closed the rest of the distance until I could have reached out and grabbed his harness if I'd wanted to. I didn't want to. Beckett, I said around the reg, the word going nowhere, swallowed by the hiss of my own gas. Come on, man. Don't fuck around. His face was angled down, chin almost touching his chest, like he'd fallen asleep upright. The narrow oval of his mask reflected my beam. I could see the black of the cave on either side of his head, the pale oval of his exposed neck at the seal where his hood didn't quite cover. His computer on his wrist blinked green. That's what got me. That stupid, mundane little blinking light, telling anyone who looked that his PPO2 was fine, his deco was tracked, his world was still under control. I lifted my hand to shake him by the shoulder. Before my fingers touched, his head snapped up. Not drifted. Snapped. Chin to chest, then bang. Straight up like someone yanked invisible strings attached to the back of his skull. He looked at me. Have you ever had someone stare straight into your mask underwater? You can't really make eye contact the way you do in air. There's glass, distortion, reflected beams. You get the gist of where they're looking, but you never quite meet. This wasn't like that. His pupils locked on mine like twin black holes. Every muscle in my body went rigid, because there was nothing vague or dead about those eyes. They were alive. They were focused. They were wrong. The rest of him stayed perfectly still. No breathing. No small buoyancy corrections to stay at depth. No tiny fin flicks you do without thinking. The longer I stared, the more details jumped out at me like they were being highlighted one by one. His second stage wasn't in his mouth. It floated just behind his right ear, still tethered by the hose, bubbles of trapped air clinging inside the clear plastic. His lips were peeled back in a smile that looked painful even at first glance. I saw too much gum, too much tooth. My mind stalled. Every dive briefing I'd ever given, every emergency scenario I'd ever practiced, None of them had room for a diver that deep with their reg out and no sign of distress. You open your mouth at 84 meters without gas pushing back and the water hits you like a truck. You don't get a second chance. I remember thinking, stupidly, maybe he's narked out of his mind and doesn't realize he spat it. Then I looked closer at that smile. The corners of his mouth weren't stopping at the usual places. They'd crept further back, like the expression had been dragged outward. The skin at the angles of his jaw bulged, white lines under the mask skirt. His throat moved, just once a slow, heavy ripple pushing up under the skin from his clavicle to his jawline. It was the motion of a swallow, but backwards. Something in me broke loose then. I slashed sideways at his harness, shoved him away from me, and kicked. My fin hit his thigh with a thud I felt through the boot. He drifted back a little, but there was no sensation of pushing a body that was neutrally buoyant and adjusting itself. He moved like a mannequin in a store window, slow and unresisting. My light beam flicked off his face and onto empty water, then rock, then brown haze as I powered into the silt again. No plan, no line, just the animal need to not be right next to that thing in Beckett's shape. Sound changes underwater when you panic. Your breathing goes from measured hiss-click to ragged h-h-h-h-i-s-s-clack h-h-h-h-i-s-s-s-s. Your bubbles explode around your head. Your pulse mutates into a pounding drum. Over all that, behind it, through it, another sound threaded in. Click, 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 like two smooth stones being tapped together. Too slow for shrimp, too deliberate. I kept my hand on the right-hand wall and let it guide me. That's what you do when you lose the line. You become the line. You pick a direction and you stick with it. Right hand rule in, right hand rule out. The passage narrowed. I had no idea how far I'd gone. 10 meters? 20? Time stretches at depth, compresses between breaths. My gauge needle was dropping like a stone. 90 bar, 80. The walls closed in until my chest scraped one side and my tanks rasped on the other. The noise went straight into my fillings. I hit a restriction. I don't remember this, I told myself, which was unhelpful and true. We'd come in through a wider passage, I was sure of it. The go was tight, but not this tight. Could Narc have wiped a section? Sure. Could I be wrong in my sense of direction? Absolutely. Could I back up easily in this choke point with a silt out behind me, and whatever the fuck that was in Beckett's gear somewhere in that murk? No. I exhaled, dumped some gas from my wing, and wriggled forward. The rock above grated across my valve, and I had a moment of pure, high, burning focus on that sound. If you shear your valve off at depth, the blast of escaping air can rocket you into the roof like a thrown toy. Or just empty your tank in 3 seconds and leave you sucking vacuum. Somehow it held. I pushed my shoulders through, one after the other, like squeezing through 2 small clothes. My chest pressed into the floor. My spine scraped the ceiling. The cave stopped being a place and became a stone coffin around me, with maybe 12 inches of water between my backplate and the ceiling. Halfway through, my right tank snagged on something. The cave owns you, my instructor used to say. You're just borrowing the space you occupy. I kicked backward, gently at first, trying to free the valve from whatever lip had caught it. It didn't budge. My legs were nearly straight already. There was no leverage. I tried forward. Nothing. Stuck. The fear that had been a constant hum since the silt out abruptly shrank to a hard, cold point. It sat in the center of my chest like a stone. I reached back, fingertips scraping blind at the obstruction. Smooth rock, sharp edge, no give. My valves were jammed against a protrusion in the ceiling. I couldn't budge my setup far enough in any direction to clear it. My SPG read 60 bar. Okay, I said to myself, voice shaking around the reg. Okay, you've been in worse jams. You can unclip a tank, pass it through, reclip on the other side. You trained for this. I trained for it in a clean quarry at 30 meters with 6 other students watching and an instructor ready to shove a spare second stage in my mouth if I screwed it up. I hadn't trained for it at 84 in a restriction that felt like it was actively tightening with a parasitic whatever the fuck wearing my dive buddy crawling around somewhere behind me. Click. Closer now. You can't pinpoint direction underwater. Sound arrives through your bones from all around. But my nervous system insisted it was behind me. Scrape. Drag. The faint rasp of something moving over rock. My fingers went numb. Literally. I watched them fumble with the clip on my right tank leash like they belonged to someone else. Get the tank free, pass it forward, you're golden. Just another drill. The clip wouldn't open. I knew how to do it by feel. I'd done it 100 times blind, topside, in a pool, in other caves. Pinch, twist, pop. This time my gloves seemed too thick, my fingers too big. Scrape, drag, click, click. It sounded like it was inches from my fins. Fuck. I breathed, which came out as a froth of bubbles, and didn't help anything. I twisted my head as far as my neck seal would allow, trying to look back along my body. All I got was a fragment of tunnel and the dying swirl of silt. My light beam, fixed forward on my hand, painted the rock in front of my mask in harsh detail. Little wormholes bored into the limestone. A fossil shell, frozen mid-spiral in the wall, older than anything with lungs. I could feel the water moving around my calves now, disturbed by something pulling itself along the floor. Not a current. A localized push, then drag, then push. I stopped fighting the clip. For a heartbeat, 2, 3, all I did was listen. Scrape, scrape, click. It stopped at my fins. That was part of me wanted to kick, to thrash, to launch myself forward hard enough to shred my suit and my rig and wedge myself deeper. The cave-trained part of me wanted to go limp, to pretend to be dead, to buy myself seconds of stillness. The third part of me, the one marinated in 84 meters worth of narc, wanted to laugh. Because of course this was how it was going to go. My boot moved. Not for me. Something closed around my ankle. The pressure was wrong, too concentrated to be a human hand in a glove. It felt like a bundle of stiff cables cinching tight, biting through neoprene into the meat. I squeezed my eyes shut like that would help, and tried to suck in a slow breath. My regulator delivered the next gulp of gas with a weird little stutter, like it was struggling with back pressure. I forced myself to turn my head that inch I had to spare to look back over my shoulder as far as I could. My light beam caught it square. Beckett's body was jammed into the space behind my legs, wedged at the start of the restriction. He hadn't swum into it like a sane or insane diver would. He'd folded himself in, elbows and knees and spine bending at angles that made no anatomical sense, joints inverted like a broken crab. The suit didn't fit anymore. His dry suit and BCD sagged on him, wrinkled like he'd shrunk inside them. Folds of material ballooned around his waist. His hood was loose at the edges, curling away from skin that had taken on a waxy, pale tone. The mask had ridden up on his face, exposing the sockets. There were no eyes in them anymore. Just pale, glistening tissue pressed up against the glass from within, pulsing faintly. The smile was gone. So was the lower half of his jaw. It hung by a shred of connective tissue and a strip of suit neck seal, flapping gently in the water like seaweed. From the gaping cavity of his mouth, where the tongue and throat should have been, something else protruded. It was a tube as thick as my wrist, translucent and segmented, like the body of a worm magnified 100 times. Fine, hair-like cilia lined its outer surface, beating in tight, synchronized waves against the water. It pushed further out as I stared, extending like it was smelling the current. There was movement inside it, dark shapes sliding along, distorting the walls as they passed. The tube swayed toward me. My SPG needle-kissed 50 bar. And that was the first moment I understood that whatever had taken Beckett wasn't just going to kill me. It was shopping for a new suit. And that was the first moment I understood that whatever had taken Beckett wasn't just going to kill me. It was shopping for a new suit. The tube uncoiled out of his throat like it heard me think that. It slid further from the ruined mouth, stretching toward my face, the cilia on its sides beating in tiny, vicious waves. The water around it shimmered, full of suspended silt and my own loose bubbles. My instinct was simple and loud: get away. I tried to kick, forgetting I was wedged. The rock above my valve bit down harder. Pain lanced through my shoulder where the harness dug in. The thing around my ankle tightened. It climbed. I felt the pressure progress up my calf in jerky increments. Whatever was inside Beckett's suit hauling itself forward hand over fist along my body. The weight settled across my thighs, then my lower back, forcing me an inch deeper into the silt and rock. My gauge flicked to 40 bar. Fuck off. I rasped into my mouthpiece, already knowing how pointless that was. The tube swayed in front of my mask, inches from the glass now, testing. Up close I could see that the translucent wall wasn't smooth. There were rings of thicker tissue at intervals, like growth lines. Underneath the skin, something shifted, dark, dense masses sliding along, the way food moves down a snake. One of those rings dilated, a little sphincter opening, and a gout of gas burped out. It rolled right past my cheeks, warmer than the cave water, sour even through the plastic taste of the reg. It was breathing, not water, gas. The tube wasn't just a feeding siphon. It was a lung. The part of my brain that still understood physics tried to cling to that. If it's exhaling gas, it's got a high internal pressure. If it's got high internal pressure at this depth, it's adapted to. My mask shifted. A hand, or the approximation of one, grabbed the frame and yanked. Cold flooded in around the edges. Cave water slapped my eyes, rushed to my nose. For a second, everything blurred. Silt, rock, a flash of pale tube. My mask didn't fly off completely. The strap held. But it was enough to shock me, to make my diaphragm spasm. I inhaled reflexively. The reg jammed between my teeth saved me. I got a mouthful of cold, dry gas and coughed it back out in a spray of bubbles. My sinuses burned. Tears, hot and useless, mixed with the water already behind the mask. Then the siphon hit. It didn't come at me fast. It didn't need to. It advanced a centimeter at a time until the tip bumped against my second stage. It felt that somehow, recognized it. It slid down. The flex hose of my reg bowed as the tube pressed along it, groping. The thing wasn't blind. It was following pressure, vibration, warmth, whatever strange senses it had. It curled around the second stage, nudging, testing the purge. I clamped my jaw down harder, my molars grinding on a mouthpiece, and shook my head. The grip on my mask tightened. Plastic creaked. Something pulled my head back, pinning my skull against the rock. I couldn't move enough to dodge. The reg jammed deeper into my mouth, biting my gums. The siphon found the exhaust ports. It latched onto the sides of my second stage like a leech. The sensation was obscene. The slight but constant vent of my exhale, which normally bubbles easily into the cave, hit a wall instead. My breath went out, hit resistance, and then was drawn away through that tube. It drank. I could feel it. Every exhale, the reg got a fraction easier to pull against, like someone was helping suck the stale gas out of my lungs. My panic, already up around 11, climbed to a pitch I didn't think existed. No, I tried to say. What came out was just more gas. Hiss, draw, pulse. The parasite, because that's what it was, let's call it what it is, pulsed in time with my breathing now. It took my exhale, did something to it, then shoved something back. The next breath in hit me wrong. It wasn't quite the flavor of our trimix. It came warmer, thicker, with a hint of metallic tang under the usual dry gas taste. My chest resisted it for a second, like my own body knew it shouldn't be there. Then the oxygen hit my blood and my receptors screamed, yes, more right now. My lungs didn't care about flavor. They cared about not dying. I inhaled again. The siphon thrummed against the reg like a living pump. In out, in out. It was hijacking my breathing loop. I realized then that I could stop this anytime if I really wanted. All I had to do was spit the reg. Let the water in. At this depth, I'd pass out in seconds, die in a minute or two. It would be ugly and painful and terrifying, but it would be mine. My choice. My last line in the sand. I tried. I genuinely tried. I opened my jaw, or tried to. The muscles didn't respond right. My teeth barely parted. The reg stayed where it was. I didn't like the conclusion that led to. The thing on my back shifted, weight sliding higher, wrapping itself more snugly against my spine. The pressure around my ribs increased. It squeezed once, experimentally. My chest compressed. It hurt. Then it didn't. The pain flashed, then was replaced by a weird, floaty clarity, a sudden easing of the CO2 burn I hadn't realized had been building. It was ventilating me, using my lungs like bellows. My SPG read 30 bar. The same part of my brain said, when that hits 0, the party's over. The parasite can help you breathe, but it can't conjure gas out of nothing. The part of my brain that had watched it spit out Beckett's computer and his wedding ring said, you don't know what it can do. The siphon moved, not away from my reg, through it. I felt the pressure increase around the mouthpiece, the soft silicone warping. Then something slick and impossibly strong pushed between my lips, nudging the hard plastic aside. It forced my jaw open like it was nothing. The reg popped free, bumped my chin, and swung away on its hose. I should have gotten a mouthful of water then. I'd mentally prepared for that cold, brutal flood since my first pool session. You never quite forget the demonstration where your instructor pulls your reg and makes you find it again. No water came. The siphon sealed to my mouth like it was made for it. The texture was disgusting, rubbery but warm, with a faint grain from those cilia. It suctioned down around my lips and nose, cutting off the cave entirely. My world shrank to darkness and pressure and the taste of it. Wort, old brine, metal, a hint of something organic and sweet underneath, like decay that had gone past the gross stage into something almost floral. It hit my tongue and my stomach lurched. I gagged. It didn't care. It pushed. My teeth scraped the inside of the tube. Then they didn't because it was past them. It drove itself into my mouth, filling it, stretching the corners of my lips until my jaw joints screamed. I couldn't breathe around it at all now. No reg, no bubbles, no water. Just that thick, pulsing mass. Instinct took over. I bit down. Hard. I felt my molars sink into something that gave, then stiffened. The tube shuddered. The cilia scraped my gums. Pain flared along my teeth, bright and sharp, and then went numb. Whatever fluid filled that tube tasted like rust. It flooded my tongue, burning and ice cold at the same time. My head rang. My limbs went loose. It wasn't just gas. It was doing something chemical, dumping something straight into my oral tissue. Nerves misfired, muscles twitched, and then I wasn't in my body properly anymore. It's like, imagine you've been driving stick your whole life, and somebody flips you into the backseat while the car keeps going. I could still feel my hands on the rock, my knees wedged, the leash digging into my trapped tank. I could feel the weight on my back, heavier now, spreading like an extra skin. But my hands weren't mine. They moved without me. The left one let go of the rock and slid back down my side, fingers finding the clip bolt snap on my right tank with eerie, calm precision. The thing up against my spine squeezed again in a rhythm that matched the pulses in the siphon in my throat. The bolt snap popped open. I hadn't done it. My right cylinder dropped, weight tugging on my side, then slid forward along my body. I watched because that's all I could do as my arm reached forward, guided by some external sense, and shoved the tank through the restriction ahead. It went past my head, scraping stone. I heard, rather than felt, the clang of metal on rock. My legs kicked. A perfect little frog kick, efficient and controlled, no extra silt. My boots didn't respond to my attempts to fight it. The parasite had slid tendrils down into around the muscles. I could feel them like extra ligaments. We moved. I want to be clear about that. This wasn't a puppet show with strings visible. I didn't feel blank or erased. I was still there, fully conscious. I just wasn't in charge. The instructions were coming from somewhere else, and my body obeyed them like they were its own. The restriction that had held me a heartbeat before became just another tight spot to squeeze through. My spine bowed in a way my chiropractor would have killed me for. My ribs compressed again, the thing wrapped around my torso, helping move the bone and cartilage like it owned them. We slid forward. My left hand caught. The unseen tendril controlling the hand just reached back, unclipped, shoved it through, reclipped. Perfect. Smooth. I could have never done it that clean, even sober in a pool. Behind us, something crunched wetly. The Beckett suit. I knew, without seeing, that we just pushed off it, left it wedged in the rock like shed skin. The image of his mask and empty sockets flashed in my head without my permission. The click-click started again. Not from one direction now, from everywhere. It came from the rock, from the water, from the parasite itself. A chorus answering itself. The cave felt less like stone and more like skull, vibrating with that exchange. The siphon pulsed in my throat in time with it. Then we were through. The restriction fell away and we dropped into open water. At least relatively open, maybe 2 meters high, 3 across. Enough that the claustrophobia backed off half a notch. The darkness in front of us wasn't the same as before. There was light there, not sunlight, not our lamps. Something deeper, a faint blue-white glow far ahead. It waxed and waned like bioluminescence, or like light shining down a shaft with waves running over it. We didn't turn around. We didn't look for the line. We went toward it. I didn't get a choice. We swam. The parasite didn't waste motion. Every kick was slow and precise. My trim was perfect, body flat, arms folded in. My gauges swung close to my chest, useless to me now. If I'd had control, I would have checked my gas obsessively. The part of my brain that tracked time by breaths tried to count, then lost it. The narcosis, the chemical cocktail leaking from the siphon, the panic, together they turned minutes into an elastic mess. We went deeper. I knew that because my ears complained. I felt the familiar pressure building, but my hands didn't go to my nose to clear. The parasite did it for me, squeezing my chest, adjusting whatever weird pressure it ran inside its own body. The water around us got colder. The rock changed texture under the light, smoother, like water had been running hard here for a long time. Then rougher, jagged, like fresh fractures. There were holes in the walls that were too round, too regular, like burrows. We passed one, and something in it moved. A flicker, a pale blur sucking back into shadow. The click-click was louder now. Closer, answered by another series, further away, lower in pitch. Calls and replies passing through the water like sonar pings. We weren't alone in that river. We were one of many. I should have passed out at some point. Between the depth, the CO2, the chemistry, my body should have tapped out. Instead, every time the edges of my vision started to gray, the siphon shoved another bolus of whatever it was into my lungs. It kept me conscious on purpose. It wanted me aware. I don't know how long that swim was. I genuinely don't. I have flashes. A shaft dropping away under us, impossibly deep, darker than anything. The parasite forced my head down to look into it. Far, far below, tiny points of greenish light pulsed like a field of stars. When they blinked off in unison, the echo of the click-click rolled up the shaft in a bass note that made my teeth hurt. A section where the cave ceiling opened into a dome and the water went hazy with faint milky threads. The parasite steered me well clear of them. One of the threads drifted closer, and I saw it wasn't a thread at all, but a translucent tendril as thick as my wrist, ending an empty dive glove still snapped to a harness. A place where the rock narrowed again, but not enough to trap us. As we slid through, something rough brushed my cheek. When my light flicked over, for just a second, I saw a wall of half-decomposed fish and frogs and birds plastered into the stone like they'd been pushed there by pressure, all of their mouths stretched wide. Then, finally, the glow ahead resolved into something I recognized. Light filtering down through a water column. We were in a vertical shaft. The parasite angled my body upward. We rose, slowly, methodically, pausing here and there, hovering for long minutes. It was doing better deco than we ever did. My wrist computer, assuming it still existed somewhere near my arm, would have screamed at me if I'd been able to see it. Instead, all I had was the sense of changing pressure, the lessening of weight on my joints, the warmth creeping back into my fingers. We hit 40 meters, and the narcosis peeled away in thin layers. I got more of myself back. Not all. Enough to register the fact that my lungs ached like I'd been running for hours, and that something slick slithered behind my sternum in time with each beat of my heart. We hit 30. The light above turned from blue to green. The parasite's grip changed. It loosened around my ribs. The weight across my back shifted higher, concentrating between my shoulder blades. The tendrils in my legs and arms eased, giving me a fraction of control. I used it badly. I tried to fight. I jerked an elbow. My shoulder responded. My fingers twitched away from their perfect trim pose. It was like trying to wrestle someone in a narrow bed. The parasite pushed back once, firmly, and my arm snapped back to its streamlined position. My throat burned. The siphon was still in there. It hadn't backed out. It was further down now. I could feel its bulk deep in my esophagus, distending it. Every convulsive swallow I tried to make just massaged it. We hit 20. The click-click from below faded. Another sound took over, the distant, distorted roar of the jungle. Insects, birds, the muffled thump of our own compressor on the truck at the surface. We were close. I felt the parasite shiver. That's the only way I can describe it. A full-body tremor, subtle but unmistakable, like a dog shaking off water. Its cilia scraped my skin from the inside where it had worked itself under the fascia. Tiny stings lit up along my spine and ribs. Then we broke into the cenote pool. 1 second there was rock in front of me. The next, space. We drifted out of the throat into a vertical column of clear water. Sunlight poured down from a round hole far above, diffused through green. I'd never been so happy to see algae in my life. We floated there for a beat. Then my head turned, unbidden, toward the open water between us and the shaft of light. There was movement there. For a second, I thought it was a school of fish, little flashes darting around. Then I realized they were reflectors, mask lenses, clips, diving, shapes, humanoid, kind of hanging motionless at different depths in the pool's gloom. Some upright, some upside down, some folded in on themselves. Old gear, old suits, older than ours. Fabric wrinkled, metal rusted, plastic clouded. Empty. They watched us. No, that's not right. They weren't watching. They were aligned. All of them facing toward the shaft where I dangled, like iron filings around a magnet. The parasite wrapped around me gave a tiny, almost indulgent pulse, and we rose without acknowledging them. At 5 meters, it finally let me breathe water. Not fully, not the way you're thinking. It eased the seal in my mouth just enough for cave water to trickle in along the edges. It mixed with whatever foul gas it was feeding me, and the result hit my tongue like old blood, like pond scum, like iron and mold and dead leaves. It tasted right to it. We hit the surface. The world exploded into sound I hadn't heard in forever. The slap of water on stone, the whine of insects, the gruff shouts of our surface tender in Spanish. A hand grabbed my harness. Lo tengo, lo tengo. We bobbed against the ladder. The parasite held my head up, my face breaking into sunlight. My eyes burned. Air hit my cheeks like flame after the cave cold. For the first time since it had stuffed itself down my throat, the siphon withdrew. Slowly, it slid up, out of my esophagus, past the back of my tongue. My gag reflex went insane. I coughed around it, body convulsing. It didn't care. It pulled itself free in one long, slick motion, like someone dragging a thick rope out of my stomach through my mouth. I saw it, for a fraction of a second, hanging there between my lips and the collar of my suit. Pale, translucent, beaded with strings of my saliva and some darker fluid. Then it snapped back, vanishing under my hood, down my neck seal, disappearing into the dry suit with the speed of something that had done this a lot. To anyone topside, it would have looked like I'd just vomited water. I did that too. As they hauled me onto the rock shelf, I rolled sideways and spewed a mix of cave water and bile onto the limestone. It steamed in the jungle heat. It smelled wrong, not just like regurgitated dive gas. There was a deep, stagnant reek to it, like water that had sat sealed in rock for centuries. ¿Dónde está el otro? Where Beckett? I tried to answer. My tongue felt too big. My throat spasmed, haunted by the phantom pressure of the siphon. Still down? I croaked. Stuck? You stuck. Gone, I said and started laughing. That's how I remember it. Anyway, me lying on my side on that wet rock shelf, dry suit leaking at the neck, laughing like an idiot while mosquitoes landed on my exposed strip of skin and our tenders shouted for the rest of the team. People think you come out of a dive like that calm and haunted. You don't. You come out cracked. They stripped my gear in record time. Someone slapped an oxygen mask over my face. The rubber smelled faintly of bleach and 30 previous divers' sweat. A portable pulse oximeter clipped onto my finger, beeping a startled rhythm at whatever horror show my blood gases were doing. Skin bends, somebody said, running hands over my arms, feeling for marbling. He's cold. Get him in the truck. We gotta bounce him to the chamber. Y el otro buzo, tender, kept yelling. He didn't come up. He didn't come up. They put me on a stretcher. The jungle canopy flickered overhead as they carried me out. I remember glimpses, vines, the metal glint of the truck, the plastic water jugs strapped to the side. The cenote surface vanished behind us, a perfect dark circle in the rock. The whole time, under the sound of their voices and the rumble of the engine, I heard it. Click, click, click. Not from the water now. From inside the oxygen mask. From my own chest. The parasite had curled itself around my lung tissue, wrapped into my diaphragm. Every time I exhaled into that mask, the exhale valve trembled and tapped in a pattern that did not belong to my breathing. I didn't say a damn thing. What was I supposed to say? Hey guys, I know you think I got DCS and lost my buddy to a silt out, but actually there's a deep water parasitic colony wearing me like a rental car. I tried once. We hit a rut in the dirt track and my stretcher bounced. The shock knocked some residual cave water looser in my sinuses. I coughed, gagged, and tore the mask off. Beckett, I gasped. Something took him. In the cave. In his suit. It's save your air, one of the guys said, pressing the mask back on hard enough to mash my nose. You talk later. Breathe now. Later. There's never really a later for that kind of conversation. You miss the window when they're still rattled enough to believe anything. And after that, it just sounds like you're trying to spread the crazy around. They got me to the chamber 2 hours later. It's at a coastal dive clinic we use, a squat concrete building 100 meters from the shoreline, painted a cheerful blue that doesn't fool anyone who knows what goes on inside. The chamber itself sits in the center like a metal lung, all bolts and viewports and hissing valves. A steel can pretending to be the ocean. They rolled my stretcher right up to the hatch. I remember the smell when they popped it open. Oil, old metal, a faint whiff of piss and stale air. I've always hated that smell. It means you fucked up underwater and now you're going to spend hours or days trapped in a tin, paying for it. They crowded in with me, attendant, medic, another diver as a safety. The hatch sealed. The world narrowed to a round porthole view of a white-coated tech giving us a thumbs up. The attendant plopped down on the bench opposite me, grinning with a professional cheeriness that made me want to punch him. All right, man. You know the drill. Blow your nose, wiggle your jaw. Tell me if you feel anything weird besides the obvious. The chamber started to hum as the compressors kicked in. Pressure built. My ears popped. My sinuses complained. The parasite inside my chest flexed once, slow and extravagant, like a cat stretching into a sunny spot. For a second, my vision blurred and the edges of the world went soft. You good? the attendant asked. Peachy, I said. He laughed. You cave guys, man. Always come out either dead or making jokes. I might have slept. I might have just drifted with my eyes open, watching the condensation beads form on the chamber walls. Time in a chamber is weird. There's no light change, no real sound except the constant hiss and thrum and the occasional creak as the metal settles. At some point, the medic checked my neurosigns again. Follow my finger, she said, moving it side to side, up and down. Any tingling? Any weakness? My right hand twitched. The parasite moved it. Just tired, I said. She nodded like she understood. You did a stupid deep one, huh? Understatement. What happened to your buddy? There it was. The first and last time someone asked in that neutral tone, genuinely wanting data, not a neat story for the report. I opened my mouth. The parasite tightened around my throat. A gentle squeeze that cut my air by 10%. Just enough to make every word I planned to say cost more. He silted out, I said. Lost the line. I tried to find him. Gas low. Had to leave. She held my gaze for a second longer than was comfortable. There was sympathy there and maybe a trace of doubt. But she'd heard variations of that story before. People get lost. Lines break. DIVER. That's what caves do. She patted my shoulder. We'll talk when we get you out. Keep breathing. As if I had a choice. The thing inside me chuckled. Not audibly. It's hard to explain. My ribs vibrated. The condensation on the chamber wall directly behind my head vibrated in the same pattern. A little trail of droplets unstuck and tracked downward in a rhythm. Click, 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 click. The attendant frowned and looked up. You hear that? Hear what? The medic said. He tilted his head. Thought I heard. Never mind. Probably just the valves. It wasn't the valves. It was the plumbing. There's a lot of water in a dive clinic. Pipes for cooling, for emergency drenched showers, for the compressors. The parasite tapped into that network like it was nerves. By the time they brought me back up to surface pressure, I knew 3 things. 1, Beckett wasn't coming back. There's no body to recover when something eats you from the inside and walks you deeper into the rock. 2, whatever had taken him was in me now, curled lovingly around my vital organs, quite pleased with its new suit. 3, it had plans. I didn't quit diving. You'd think I would. You have this kind of thing happen to you. You figure you'd sell your gear on Facebook Marketplace and move to a cabin in the mountains as far from a puddle as possible. I tried for a minute. When a university pulled the plug on the expedition, officially for safety reasons, unofficially because they didn't want to deal with the PR of a dead postdoc, I went home. A small apartment in a coastal town where the air always smelled faintly of salt and diesel from harbor. The shower made me nervous. That's how bad it was. I'd stand in there and feel the water hitting my shoulders and listen past the spray for taps in the pipes. Click, click, click. Sometimes I heard them. Sometimes I told myself I heard them. I drank bottled water. I avoided the ocean. I slept with the window open and a fan on high, trying to drown out any sounds from the plumbing. It didn't help. The parasite doesn't talk in words. It talks in urges. Around week 3, I started waking up with my wetsuit laid out on the bed next to me, neatly unzipped like someone had set out clothes for work. I live alone. The first time I chalked it up to sleepwalking. The third time, I admitted that if this was just my subconscious, it had a really shitty sense of humor. At the same time, the physical symptoms started. Random contractions of my diaphragm that felt like hiccups but weren't. Little ripples running along my ribs. A sensation that my lungs were never quite empty, like there was always one more breath sitting there. One night, lying in bed listening to the neighbor's washing machine through the wall, my chest clamped down hard. I couldn't inhale. I sat up, clawing at my throat. No obstruction, no asthma, just my own muscles refusing to cooperate. And under that panic, there was a gentle, firm pressure from the inside, like someone putting their hand over yours on a steering wheel. Not this way, that sensation said. Wrong depth, wrong gas. It let me breathe again 30 seconds later, after dark spots had started to bloom at the edges of my vision. I didn't go to the hospital. What was I going to say? Hey, my lungs locked up for half a minute, but I'm fine now. And also, I think there's a cave organism nesting in my chest. Instead, I did exactly what it wanted. I went back to work, not academia. That door closed itself pretty fast. There's only so many debriefs you can sit through where people refer to your dead friend as the incident before you decide maybe peer-reviewed journals aren't your path anymore. Commercial diving, though, that path open wide. There's always work for people who are happy underwater, who aren't afraid of overheads and dark water and long hours in saturation. Inspection gigs on oil platforms, repair work on pipelines, sonar array maintenance, depth, pressure, metal hulls singing under stress. It found me that work. I'm sure of it. The job postings that floated to the top of my searches, the old contacts who suddenly remembered my name and had spots to fill on short notice with great pay and shit conditions. It nudged me along like a current. You can tell yourself you're making choices, but sometimes the water is making them for you. The first big contract was a listening station. Technically, it was a benthic acoustic monitoring installation, a spread of seismometers and hydrophones bolted to the seafloor 120 kilometers offshore, in a patch of ocean that's a lot deeper than tourists like to think about when they sit on the beach with their beers. We worked off a small research vessel retrofitted for commercial ops. Think cramped bunks, always damp corridors, a galley that smelled perpetually of frying oil and wet neoprene. I signed on as one of the habitat tenders and backup diver. We weren't doing bounce dives from the surface. Too deep. We were going in saturation. You know what a SAT system is? Picture a steel cylinder bolted to the deck of a ship. Then picture another cylinder hanging off the side, the bell. You and a few of your friends climb into the top side can. They close the door, and then they gradually crank up the pressure until your bodies think they're living at whatever depth you're going to work at. You eat, sleep, shit, and exist at that pressure for days or weeks. When it's time to go to work, they thread you into the bell, flood it, drop you down, and you swim out through a little door to do your thing. Then you go back in the bell, back up to the surface, but you stay at depth pressure inside the can until the whole job's done and they can afford the days it takes to decompress you. A steel ocean inside a bigger ocean. The parasite loved it. The moment we sealed the hatch on the first SAT run and the gauges started spinning up, it relaxed in a way that almost made me feel good, like scratching an itch I hadn't been able to reach. My fellow tender noticed. "You look happier down here than you did topside," he said, bouncing onto his bunk as the chamber creaked. "Most guys go the other way on their first Saturday. Feels like home," I said before I could stop myself. He laughed. "That's fucked up, man." He wasn't wrong. The first few shifts were routine. We dropped the primary dive team in the bell, watched them on the small green-tinted monitors as they swam along the array, torch beams cutting across silt and cables and the occasional sluggish fish. I sat on a fold-down bench, headset on, listening to the chatter. "Bell, Diver 1 at Sensor 6. Looks good. Copy that, 1. It was just work. Dirty, cold, boring work. Until the knock started. We were at 280 meters that day, roughly 900 feet. Real depth. The bell was parked 3 meters off the bottom, just above the array. The divers were running cables, their breathing heavy in my ears. Somewhere above us, the ship's hull groaned with the slow roll of swell. I heard the first knock as a tiny echo in my headset. Top, top, top. I thought it was someone bumping their helmet against the bell frame, or maybe just the acoustic shadow of a tool hitting metal. Then it came again. Top, top, top. Same rhythm I'd heard under the jungle months before. Same cadence. The parasite tightened around my lungs in recognition. The hair stood up on the back of my neck all the same. "Diver 1, you banging on something?" I asked into the mic, trying to keep my voice level. "Negative Tinder," he huffed back. Hands are on the cable. "Why? You hearing something?" "Just background noise." "Ignore me." The other Tinder in the chamber glanced over. "You good, Ash?" "Yeah, I lied." Just compression headache. He shrugged and went back to his Sudoku. The knocks kept coming. Not through the headset now, through the chamber walls. It started as a faint tick under the hiss of the gas feed. Then louder, a clear, sharp rap that resonated in the steel. Something was knocking on the hull. Out there, at 900 feet, you don't get random shit knocking on your hull at that depth. There's nothing big enough to do it that isn't some kind of equipment failure. And that sure as hell doesn't come in a tidy tap-tap pattern. The other tender heard it this time. He froze, pencil halfway through a number. Please tell me that's something I don't have to write a report about, he muttered. The medic in our can looked up from her chart. What are you hearing? A louder knock cut her off. Talp, 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 talp. The lights flickered. I heard Diver 1 swearing faintly in my headset. Tinder, we just got some interference on comms. You adjusting valves up there? -1, I said. You feeling anything on the umbilical? Any tension? Feels normal. Except it wasn't. Something tugged at me from the inside, an insistent pressure between my shoulder blades. It took me a second to realize it wasn't physical. It was the parasite. It was leaning toward the wall. I don't know how else to say that. Against my will, my hand reached out and laid itself flat on the chamber's steel skin. The metal pulsed under my palm. Once, twice. On the third pulse, my bones vibrated in a pattern I recognized. Click, click, click. The parasite answered. In the walls, in the pipes, in my chest. All of them talking. Ash, the medic said, you really don't look so good. I pulled my hand back. Just vertigo, I said. I'm gonna lie down. I didn't. Instead, I took off my headset, ignoring Diver 1 calling my name, and pressed my ear to the wall where my hand had been. It was like putting your head against the hull of a boat in a storm. There was structure there, resonance, but underneath it, layers. Tapping, scratching, a distant roar like 1,000 tiny waterfalls. I caught impressions more than sounds. A spotlight beam passing over a swarm of empty dive gear hanging in murky water. A submarine hull shuddering as something flexed against it from the outside. A flooded elevator shaft in a drowned city. Cables swaying gently as something pale slid past. They were my memories. They weren't human. I yanked my head back. The parasite did not like that. Pain flared along my jaw. My diaphragm spasmed. For a second, my breath stuttered, then resumed in a new rhythm. Faster, harsher. That's when I understood for the first time that I wasn't just wearing it. We were sharing. Its network was my nervous system now, too. Ash, sit your ass down, the medic snapped. Now, you're white as the fucking wall. He said, more to keep her from calling the surface supervisor than out of obedience. The knocks stopped as abruptly as they'd started. Silence settled back into the chamber like silt. Bell, you copy any of that? Surface asked on a main comm channel, voice crackly with concern. We got a weird transient on the hull sensors. Nah, Surface, just you guys farting topside. Diver 1 shot back, bravado thick as ever. We're good down here. Finishing up the run. They weren't entirely wrong. On their cameras, nothing had changed. The array sat there, a line of dark boxes on the seabed, cables looping between them. A couple of fish flitted by, oblivious. We finished the shift. We came back up in the bell. We crawled out into the habitat, wet and tired and hungry. The parasite didn't say anything. It rarely does directly. It just tugged. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shaft under the jungle again, full of green lights blinking on and off in impossible unison. And I knew, with the kind of ugly certainty you only get from firsthand experience, that what I was seeing now on this job, little knocks, hints of movement, was the edge of something much bigger, like hearing the first tiny crack in the hull and knowing what depth you're really at. I try to limit contact, tighten procedures, keep guys out of the water more than they needed to be. I argued with supervisors. We're fine. Our dive sup, Novak, said one evening, waving a hand at the data. Look at this. Clean runs, minimal alarms, no DCS hits. The client is thrilled. Why are you trying to jam a wrench in this? Because we're getting anomalous noise, I said, tapping one of the recorded knock sequences on the monitor. Hydrophones pick it up, home mics pick it up. It's consistent. That's not just random. Something's down there with us. It's the fucking array, he snapped. It's a listening post. It listens. Sometimes it feeds back. We've got enough real shit to worry about without you spooking the boys with ghost stories. It's not a ghost story. What is it then? I open my mouth. Beckett's empty eyes flashed in my head, and the parasite squeezed, just enough to cut the end of my sentence in two, turning "there's something in the water" into a wheeze. I clamped my teeth shut. Thought so, Novak said. Look, I get it. You had a bad cave dive. You lost someone. You're jumpy. But out here, we stick to procedures and physics. The water kills you in plenty of real ways. We don't need to invent new ones. He turned back to his paperwork. Conversation over. I walked out onto the deck. It was night. The sea around us heaved and glowed. Faint bioluminescence in the bow wave as the ship swung on its DP thrusters. The air smelled like salt and diesel and frying onions from the galley. Standard offshore perfume. I stood at the rail and looked down into the black. You can't see depth at night. You just see your own reflection in the water, the ship's lights shining back up at you, drowning out anything below. Except that night, I swear I saw something else. Just for a second, between wave troughs, a shape surfaced. It wasn't a person, not fully. Think of an inflated dry suit with nobody quite filling it, bobbing just below the surface, arms hanging wrong. Its face mask, skin, was turned up toward me, but it was too far to make out features. A wave lifted it. The lights caught a strip of something pale at the throat, like a collar. Then it sank again, as if polite enough not to show off. The parasite pressed gently outward against my ribs like a hand on a window, saying, "Look, see? Home." I backed away from the rail. "I get it," I whispered. "You don't want me telling them. You don't want attention. You just want access." It didn't answer. Didn't have to. The next job after that wasn't the listening station. It was a pipeline weld on an aging oil platform in a different field. Shallower water, 60 meters or so. We did it on surface supplied, no sat this time. Straight, eye-bulging cold water, thick umbilicals, the smell of crude in every droplet that came back up. Different crew, different sup, same clicks. The platform had been there long enough to accumulate its own ecosystem. Barnacles encrusted the legs, mussels layered in dark curtains, anemones waved in the weak current. Shoals of baitfish flashed in and out of the flare light. The sea around the legs was a constant, low, roaring whisper. Our job was to cut out a corroded section of pipe and weld in a clamp. Routine. Dangerous, sure, but in the usual, predictable ways. They sent me down as Diver 2 on the second day, relief for a guy who wasn't feeling great. I dropped through the green, watching the platform legs appear out of murk like the ribs of some metal skeleton. The sound of the rig, generators, pumps, humans living badly above me, filtered down as a muffled rumble. At 40 meters, I felt the parasite perk up. Not like the sat depth, but close. It stroked along my diaphragm, adjusting my breathing slightly, preempting any CO2 build. "You're like a spoiled cat," I muttered around the wretch. "Only happy in a cardboard box." "Say again, too?" Topside asked. "Nothing. Just talking to myself. Keep it professional, please. You're on a hot mic. Copy that." I hit bottom, boots sinking into soft silt. The pipe loomed in front of me, a fat metal cylinder half buried, blotched with rust and marine growth. Diver 1's work from the morning was obvious. The old clamp half cut, scorch marks from the torch. I gotta work. Hands busy, brain half elsewhere. That's how you get killed, I know. But it's also how you cope with long, repetitive tasks in cold water. You let your body run on training, and you let your mind drift. Mine drifted back into the rock under the jungle, into shafts and green lights and empty suits. The parasite liked that. It amplified those memories, replayed them with extra sensory detail. pressure on my ribs, the taste of ancient water, the click-click traveling through stone. I was so wrapped up in that feedback loop that at first I thought the new click was just in my head. Talp, 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 closer, louder. I killed the torch and turned. Nothing in front of me but the forest of platform legs and the dusky water column stretching up into the rig's shadow. I panned my light. Beams of white sliced through green. Little clouds of particulate glowed and drifted. Something moved between the legs. I jerked my light toward it. A diver. At least I thought so. Black suit, twin set on the back, fins mask. No umbilical. No light of his own. Just hanging there 15 meters away, watching. Topside, you copy a third diver in the water? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. -2, came the answer. You and one are it. One is still at the clamp behind you. What do you see? I turned my head. Diver 1 was exactly where he should be, on the other side of the pipe, wedge of his light visible. His bubbles rose in a steady plume. I turned back. The free diver was closer now. He hadn't swum. He just lost distance. My light hit his mask. His eyes were wrong. Beckett wrong. Too focused. Too hungry. The parasite inside me responded like a dog seeing another dog. It surged forward, pressing against the inner wall of my chest. My breath hitched. My hands clenched. The thing in the water tilted its head, as if curious. Then it smiled. The water pressure at 60 meters won't let you open your mouth for long without killing yourself, but it let him. Whatever was inside those lungs kept the sea out. The edges of his lips tore slightly as they stretched, pale and ragged, but he didn't seem to notice. I knew that smile. I'd seen a version of it under rock. Ash, talk to me, Topside said. Your breathing just spiked. You got a problem down there. The parasite squeezed. My vocal cord stopped. Diver 1's light flicked in confusion. 2, you okay, man? The empty suit thing drifted closer, arms limp at its sides. Its BCD straps hung loose. One of its tanks sagged, attached by only a single hose. Just like Beckett, I understood something then that made my skin crawl inside the suit. These weren't isolated incidents. They were templates. These things were wearing our gear, our bodies, our standard failures like costumes. Same broken strap, same dangling tank, same stretched smile, recycling patterns. The parasite in me didn't want conflict. It didn't want a scene, not here, not where Topside could maybe get a camera on it, send ROV footage up the chain, stir up curiosity. It wanted me to look away. It made me turn. My muscles obeyed against every screaming instinct. I pivoted back to the pipe, forced my hands to the torch. The weight of my harness settled on my shoulders as if nothing had changed. Behind me, through the water and steel and my own ribcage, I felt a touch. Not physical, a resonance. 2 tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. Whatever war that diver out there knocked on my chest from the outside, the parasite inside me answered. Tap, tap, tap. Information passed between them in that simple sequence. I don't know what. A handshake protocol? A map? A status update on the health of the local network? I didn't get a translation. I just got the dread. They let me finish the weld. They let me come back up the line through the green and the dark to the surface, coughing and cold and pissed off and terrified. They let me sleep in my bunk that night, the rig's hum vibrating through the thin walls, the smell of oil in my nose. They let me listen from inside my own body as they spread. Every shower head that dripped without being turned on. Every bilge pump that kicked over for no obvious reason. Every unexplained wet footprint on a dry steel deck. I watch people shrug it off as normal offshore weirdness. Water finds a way, they say. They don't know how right that is. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you this now. Why break the unspoken deal? Why risk letting it know I'm not just a fully compliant suit? The honest answer is because I don't think it cares anymore. I don't think it sees us as a threat worth hiding from. The ocean is big, bigger than your worst mental picture, bigger than any charter boat brochure. You stand on the beach and you see a flat line and you think, yeah, Okay, that goes for a while. You don't picture the ravines, the trenches, the drowned mountains, or the rivers under rock, or the reservoirs behind dams, or the flooded cities. It's all connected. Cenote, aquifer, river, lake, pipe, sea, rig intake, ballast tank, bilge, chamber, shower, tap. And in that network, using that connectivity, there's something else moving. Something that learned early on that crawling across land on flimsy legs was a stupid way to travel. Why bother when all you have to do is where the things that already go where you want? We are its exosuits, DIVER, submariners, saturation techs, fishermen who lean too far over the rail and come up smiling wrong, tourists on cheap cruises who vanish overboard at night and are never found. Except the ship keeps picking up weird knocks on its hull afterwards. Lighthouse keepers who fall down damp stairs and hit their head. And when the relief crew comes, the logs are full of entries about hearing tapping in the fog. The story I'm supposed to be telling you is just one little incident in a cenote under jungle. One guy dead, one guy altered. A clean arc with a creepy ending you can nod along to and then click away from. But that's not how it works. The cenote was just where it got into me. The listening station was where I realized it wasn't alone. The pipeline job was where I understood it was coordinated. And this, me, on a mattress bolted to a bulkhead in a creaking ship cabin, recording this into a crappy handheld mic while the hull clicks around me. That's just another node. I feel it watching the levels as I talk. It knows what I'm saying. It doesn't stop me. Why would it? You're not going to stop taking showers. You're not going to stop swimming at beaches or taking ferries or drinking from taps or flushing your toilets. You're not going to stop working on rigs or joining the Navy or signing up for your first cave diving course because some stranger on the internet told you a story about a cenote and a dead man named Beckett. You're going to forget most of this the next time you hear a bathroom faucet drip at night and tell yourself it's just bad plumbing. But maybe, just maybe, the next time you're on a ship or a platform or in a lake house or sitting on a shore or reservoir late at night and you hear something knock on the hull, top, 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 you'll think of me. You'll think of 84 meters on a rock, of a siphon sliding down a throat, of air that wasn't air keeping a diver alive for a long swim home. You'll tell yourself it's just the hull expanding and contracting, just thermal noise, just shrimp, and you'll be right. Until the day it's not. I can feel it stirring now. The ship I'm on is heading into deeper water. We've got another job lined up, another spread of sensors to install, another justification to put human lungs where they don't belong. The parasite in my chest is excited. My fingers are tingling. My jaw aches in that particular way I've learned means it's ready to open wider than any human mouth should. The mic in my hand feels heavier. The walls around my bunk creak in a familiar rhythm. Click, click, click. They're answering. So I'm going to stop talking soon. Not because I've run out of things to say. Because it's time to work. Because the bell is waiting and the water is black and the hull is singing and something under all that is impatient. I told myself for a long time that I'd find a way to kill it. Open my mouth at depth, flood myself with seawater, take it down with me. But that's not how this game works. I'm not the suit. I'm a layer. If I tear this one, it'll just peel out and find another. Maybe one of the guys on my team. Maybe one of the tech's topside when a pipe bursts and drenches him. Maybe the medic when she steps into a shower in port. Maybe you. So I'm doing the only thing that feels like it might matter, even a little. I'm telling you, not to make you safer, just so that when it finally reaches whatever it's climbing toward, whatever pressure, whatever dark plateau at the bottom of all this water, it can't pretend nobody was watching. If you're listening to this on land, far from any ocean, and you're feeling smug, don't. Rivers run under cities. Reservoirs sit behind your dams. Water towers perch over your neighborhoods, feeding pipes that snake through your walls. You're never as far from the deep as you think. Turn off this recording. Listen, really listen. If you hear it, faint through plaster or steel or stone. Top, top, top. Don't knock back. Don't go looking. The last thing you want is for the water to learn your name.